Okay, we're going to look at the passenger perspective in relation to neurodiversity. Awareness is key. A neurodiverse condition itself provides difficulties, so don't add to them, ease them. And once you become aware of what difficulties are, and you can obviously start putting reasonable adjustments in place. Now, before contemplating any journey, previous experiences will influence that decision whether or not to purchase a ticket and travel with you. As a neurodivergent person, in addition to the whole process of researching, planning and booking, I will be considering how stressful that journey itself is going to be, including the waiting rooms and connection times, rather than the reason for the journey itself. And so this means I need very friendly but quick answers and solutions to any difficulties. Where I've had a bad experience in the past, this will mean that I'm unlikely to book and spend money with you. Now, there could actually be a discrimination claim if a person was to pursue such a case, potentially. There's not always discrimination everywhere, but it's potentially there. On the other hand, with small, minor adjustments, your organisation and industry can be neurodivergent positive and can make life a lot easier for passengers, especially those who are with neurodivergent conditions. So the people with dyscalculia and dyslexia, for example, may have difficulty with timetables, especially in the traditional format. But many people find them useful, such as those with ADHD, who have working memory difficulties. And so we need to check and double check and triple check and calculate our journey, and also make last minute changes without missing their only or last train home. People with ADHD may misread a time or date when booking. So other people, this is true of other neurodivergent conditions too. So when booking a ticket on a budget, any errors of date or time can be really stressful. And that can also affect whether or not the journey and say, for example, the meeting or the day out, etc., occurs, and obviously the outcome. So do you want to have a negative outcome on that person's job interview that day? Some operators have apps that are okay, but others not so easy to navigate, and this can cause difficulties too. When reserving a seat, it's important to remember that there's a reason for that reservation seat, and it's important that it's honoured, because otherwise there is a high degree of stress and anxiety, which, especially with those with epilepsy, can lead to a seizure. When delays and cancellations occur, this is an unfortunate situation. Usually nobody's to blame. It's just one of those things. It's not a happy occurrence, but it just happens sometimes. And with these delays in mind, people on the autism spectrum, especially with sudden changes, they find it very difficult to cope with, and will so be reliant on a seat and time. And so where not reserved, they still need a seat. And when it's busy, it's difficult to get. A quiet train, especially the seat, is essential because of the distress that can produce. But it's not always actually policed very well, and noise isn't always discouraged, and smells, the aromas, the sensory difficulties as well. It's like a computer virus. The smell of an egg sandwich or Doritos can cause a lot of distress for somebody on the autistic spectrum and with ADHD. Now, I like to have my valuables with me by my feet, or on a seat at the side of me, or underneath. I'll move it if somebody needs to ensure somebody can get a seat. But I need to be able to ensure that I don't forget that bag. Now, I will be able to hear an announcement if I have my headphones on that block out noise. So I'm therefore not able to engage as I would like to. Now, to take the disabled seat that I need on the bus, I have to be very near the front of the queue, and so have to limit my activities. I also lose track of time because of my ADHD and also my PTSD, but also my autism, and it means I can't, the ADHD, PTSD and autism means I find it very difficult to queue. So I'll be at the back of the queue and I'll miss out on getting this disabled seat, and it causes a lot of difficulty for various reasons. Now, the cancelling of reserved seats for a disabled railcard holder is potentially a discriminatory act. Allowing disabled passengers to board first any transport, whether it be train, bus, airline, let them get on there, let them board first, and that will satisfy the Equality Act Section 20 duty in that regard. Okay then, so what reasonable adjustments are there for neurodivergent passengers? Well, let the disabled board first. Just briefly mention that. We love to queue in Britain, and as an autistic, I like to see a queue, but this can be a problem. So let disabled people board first so that we can get the seats we need, not want, but need, whether they're reserved or otherwise. By misreading the time as well, we might be at the back of the queue, possibly without a seat. And this too can be extremely difficult and stressful, especially if you have dyspraxia or ADHD. Now, when it comes to bus stops, now as an organisation, you know what routes go where and all of the stops, but many of your passengers don't, especially if they're new to an area or visiting. So why not provide a map of bus stops, especially where on a street there are many to choose from? It can be highly distressful and confusing. Clarity is key. Where a temporary bus stop is provided, which they're quite useful, there should be the same clear signage and information as permanent, and obviously directions to it too. Okay, all right, communication then. The medium of communication preferred always depends on the person's preference, as well as being influenced by their condition, such as dyslexia, dyscalculia. Now, with ADHD, we like things printed in front of us. Now, ask the person what they prefer, quite simply, and use that method, choosing from a number of variant, different ready formats. Make sure they're always available, ready to use. Make sure there's a quick and easy point of contact suitable, such as text, a telephone call, email, face-to-face. Lots of different people prefer different things generally, but with a condition, you're a little bit more limited. You need to make sure that you answer a person's question very quickly too. Don't say, I'll get back in 4 hours. That's too late, especially with neurodiverse conditions. Now, we touched on delays in calculations earlier, but although they are inevitable, but they do cause anxiety and distress, particularly to those on the autism spectrum, as sudden changes can be difficult. The person on the spectrum may appear angry, but in fact they're very anxious and frightened and they're of no danger to others. Make sure that neurodivergent people have a seat, ideally the one they reserved, and let disabled people, especially the neurodivergent as well, that's why I'm here talking to you, let them board first. And so they're not in the middle of the carriage, say, and the push and shove of people coming forward. Let us get on the train, the bus, the plane, whatever it is, first. Now, when it comes to sensory matters, I touched on it again. The quiet coach is not always quiet, and it should really be renamed silent. And also, certain foods should be banned from that coach. The aroma of certain foods and chemicals can be very distracting and therefore distressing as well for an autistic or an ADHD person. By naming the coach neurodivergent positive, other passengers will be very accepting of this. When wearing headphones, a person is unaware of any announcement. So especially in the quiet coach, have a lighting system to highlight the tannoy is about to be used or is in use. Changing ticket dates and times, really important. Not an obvious one maybe. This might be required because of an accidental error, for example, that's a direct result of a person's neurodivergent condition. So rather than charging a fee or saying it can't be done, just do it for free for disabled rail card and disabled bus pass holders. Also, even if the date and time is correct, due to the condition, it may be that the person needs to change quickly. So change without penalty when required to do so. Okay, neurodiversity, passengers, and best practice. Make it as easy as possible for a neurodivergent person to speak with you, which includes face-to-face and online. When a person is calling you, then remove those barriers, such as the many options that you have to choose, especially when you've got dyslexia and dyscalculia, because, for example, they may have difficulty with interpreting an auditory request. For example, press 1 for delayed trains, press 2 for taxis, and so on. When a person books a ticket, then it's possible that a mistake has been made too, with a date or a time. So when a neurodivergent condition is proved, then allow a change free of charge and without hassle. Where a person has autism or ADHD, then they may have a difficulty in waiting for, we do have a difficulty in waiting for things. We have extreme impatience. It causes a lot of anxiety. And we may overestimate the time between journeys. So where a time needs to be brought forward, then allow this free of charge, because otherwise you're making a person with autism or ADHD wait several hours or half an hour in a busy station to get home. Just let them get on the journey. It's not a problem. Why is it? This waiting would cause additional stress and anxiety. Allow neurodivergent people and those with other disabilities onto your service first, especially when there are no reserved seats. A neurodiverse person may need a specific seat, whilst others require a different one. Also, if on first, they don't have to be surrounded by crowds and people pushing and shoving in the rush just to get on. When a service is disrupted and reserved seats have been cancelled, always allow a seat for a neurodivergent person, and of course other disabilities too. Where there is a disruption in service, this can of course cause difficulties for many reasons. But with autism and also ADHD, the sudden changes can cause a great deal of stress and anxiety. So consideration should be given to how we're going to alleviate this. There's many different options. One of such way is providing space away from the hustle and bustle of a bus, rail or air terminal, such as that found in some of the first class lounges on LNER and other places. But for those with a neurodivergent condition, they need an area where they can be calm and relaxed and just reduce that sensory overload, because that can become overwhelming and cause difficulties. Really important that a charging point for devices, because we have our devices and they are soothing elements, and so we need to be able to charge those. Where there's bus stop and there's replacement, it's essential, of course, that there is clarity of information provided for those that need it. Again, I've touched on it earlier, but where there are multiple bus stops, in a long street, for example, and I know in Edinburgh near the station there's quite a lot. Have a map of all the bus stops. So where are you? You're here. That's when a person's wearing headphones, we are unable to hear the announcements. So an alternative needs to be available. It could be just a sign above the door, electric sign. A neurodiverse person may, of course, be wearing them too to eliminate background noise and to calm ourselves down. And so we might be unaware of any particular announcement that this is the last stop, and so this to be able to make our journey. Now, on many occasions, the quiet coach is not being used as intended, and those that need it, such as with ADHD and autism, are still subjected to loud conversations, headphones with music too loud, so you get that amongst other sensory distressing factors. Could be a packet of Doritos or an egg sandwich or something. So ensure that on all forms of transport, that drivers, guards, and other crew remind those in the quiet coach to actually be quiet and considerate of the neurodiverse. Give them detail, give them a specific instruction rather than just telling them it's a quiet coach. Well, they know it's a quiet coach, but they have to be reminded. Think, well, because people are quite selfish and they go, oh, well, I'm not disturbing them, it's just little old me. And it turns out they are disturbing people and upsetting and causing distress. Advisably, rename the quiet coach to silent coach.